This time I am going to recap a movie called The Voyeurs. This film tells the story of a couple named Pippa and Thomas who have just moved into an apartment where they can see firsthand the household situation of their neighbors across the street. At first, they were just idly peeking at it from afar. But as time goes on, they become more and more addicted and obsessed with the lives of their neighbors. The movie begins with a couple named Pippa and Thomas who have just moved into their dream apartment. The two celebrate by having a drink by the open window while chatting about their child's future. Then they looked out the window to see their neighbors across the street holding a photo shoot inside the apartment, followed by a hot scene. The next morning, Pippa went to work as usual at one of the optical clinics there. As a doctor's assistant specializing in eye diseases, she treats people with eye problems. She also received a gift from the doctor as a congratulatory gift for her apartment. Since the two lived there, they often looked out the window to see what their neighbors were up to. One night, Pippa wakes up to get water and accidentally sees one of her female neighbors leaving her husband in the apartment alone. After being observed, Pippa begins to be attracted to her neighbor's handsome man who has a seductive body. Then she bought binoculars to peek at her neighbors, until she accidentally witnessed a woman coming to her neighbor's apartment. However, it was not the woman from yesterday. It turned out that they wanted to do a photo shoot. But over time, they began to take off their clothes until everything was off. Then they got into action. Seeing this, Pippa gave her husband the binoculars and she moved behind him and began to undress him. Eventually, Pippa gets into action with her husband while continuing to monitor the situation on the other side. Since that incident, Pippa learned that this man often slept with other women. Because she was so curious about her neighbor's relationship, she started gossiping with her friends while figuring out how she could hear their conversations from afar. It turns out that there is a way, with the laser they can hear sounds from afar. Unfortunately, the method was a bit difficult because it required a mirror so that the laser could be reflected again and produce sound. It just so happened that the neighbor was having a costume party. The two of them disguised themselves in costumes so they could get in to put a mirror in the apartment. They followed the party atmosphere and placed the mirror. After their efforts were successful, Pippa and Thomas began to install the tools. As a result, the laser beam can produce sound. It just so happened at that time they were arguing, the jealous wife had seen her husband with another woman at the party. At work, she was surprised to see this woman in her clinic. This woman's name was Julia. She went there to check her eyes as well as buy glasses because the old ones broke during the fight last night. From yesterday's meeting, Pippa and Julia started to get along. They even started chatting about their respective lives. Every day, Pippa often sat by the window while spying on them and began to be obsessed with them. One night, she woke up. Thomas was still asleep. She continued to monitor her neighbors. Then suddenly she thought of telling Julia that her husband had cheated on her. Through her computer connected to their printing device, she sent a message to Julia. Suddenly, Thomas wakes up and finds out what his wife is doing. Thomas was immediately disappointed in his wife and felt it was the wrong thing to do. Pippa, who knew the truth about Julia's cheating husband, felt compelled to act. The next morning, Thomas and Pippa had a chance to get along again, and Pippa promised that she wouldn't snoop again. But unfortunately, it didn't last long after she saw that Julia had committed suicide. Seeing the incident, the two began to panic and Thomas did not know what to do and chose to leave Pippa. Since being abandoned by Thomas, Pippa has been frustrated. So did Julia's husband. Pippa sees him enter the bar and she immediately follows him there. Inside the bar, Pippa silently watched him. But apparently, he realized that he was being watched. This man approached her table and introduced himself as Sebastian. In the beginning, they started chatting normally. But the longer the chat goes into personal things. From that chat, they got closer. On that occasion, Sebastian immediately invited Pippa to his apartment. The reason is for a photo shoot. Pippa does not refuse because she is also interested in Sebastian and knows what they will do next. She immediately followed Sebastian's directions, including telling him to take off all his clothes, and the action began. Meanwhile, Thomas came to his apartment to visit Pippa. Thomas took a drink in the refrigerator and after feeling it turned out to be bad, then threw it into a place where birds often drink water. He accidentally saw Sebastian enjoying himself with another woman. It turned out that the woman was his wife. Then the next morning, Pippa returned to her apartment and was immediately shocked when her husband had hanged himself. After approximately 2 weeks, never saw Sebastian again. Pippa visited her friend and told her the origin of her life problems. From the first, she often snooped until Thomas died. One night, Pippa came to the opening of Sebastian's exhibition because Sebastian had invited her before. Many people came to the event. Sebastian even greeted her. After the show started, Sebastian invited someone to come on stage. What surprised Pippa, it turned out that the woman was Julia, who she thought was dead. And what surprised her even more was that what was on display was her photo. One by one the photos are displayed. After being explained, it turns out that all this time when Pippa was watching the household of Julia and Sebastian, they were also watching the household of Pippa and Thomas, which was initially harmonious until it ended tragically. The next day, Pippa decided to move. She packed up all her belongings and checked the bird feeder outside. She wondered why the birds that had been drinking the water suddenly died. One day, Julia and Sebastian got a parcel of wine placed near the door. Both drank it without finding out who sent it. Soon there was a message through the print machine that read that Thomas did not commit suicide, but he was killed by Julia. They chased Pippa until finally Pippa was cornered in her clinic. Pippa explained about the incident of Thomas's murder committed by Julia, poisoning Thomas's drink in the refrigerator and hanging it as if Thomas hanged himself. Suddenly, Julia felt dizzy. Shortly after that, Julie fainted, as did Sebastian. It was because the wine they drank was a gift from Pippa that had been mixed with drugs. Then Pippa did the unexpected with their eyes. Pippa made them blind and the movie ended there. I hope you enjoyed the video. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like the video.